Welcome back, everybody, to the Road to 1,000 Users. I'm John Mello. We had an interesting chat today in the Bubble Freelancer Discord server around the idea of Bubble devs selling their apps on sites like MicroAcquire or Tiny Acquisitions. And if you don't know these sites, they're basically like the name kind of says what they are, but they're basically like you would list an app that you have on there. It may or may not have users. It usually has some kind of revenue and traction to demonstrate the idea. And then you sell it. You just sell it to somebody who's interested in buying that, not building it from scratch. It's an interesting path, but it brought up a lot of conversation around, you know, uh, no-code developers jumping from project to project. When is a project kind of considered a failure, or what, and also like what is the trajectory for someone who goes in with that mindset of like, I'm going to build this to sell it as a tiny acquisition, right? So it's very contrary to like the traditional way that you would think about startups, in the sense of like, oh, there's this exit plan or exit strategy. We try to make as much money or we try to grow as much as possible, and we either go public via an IPO, or we sell the company and the founder gets rich, right? So like that's the way that we've traditionally thought about startups. And these tiny acquisitions are something a little bit different than that, where it's like you're not really making that much money. You may make like $5,000 on an app idea or $10,000. And like, the question is like, is the time spent building that user base and the app itself, right? Both of those things take time. Is it worth the payoff that you could potentially get? I don't know. And I don't really have an answer for this either. It's more just an interesting concept that I've been, that we were exploring this week. And I want to know more about it. I want to hear from people who are listing their sites on, or their apps on Tiny Acquisitions, and get a sense of like how did you get to that point, right? Did you go in with the mentality of, I just want to start this kind of small concept. I'm not really interested in scaling it, but I am interested in solving a problem for like 10, 20, maybe 100 people, and then just selling it to somebody who's more interested in the idea. Did you go in with that mentality, or did you start working on it, and like you had an app idea, you started building it, and you started attracting some users, and that something changed in your life, whether you realized, I'm really not that interested in this problem, or some life circumstance happened that you were caused you to want to list it. So I don't know where it comes from. I'm sure there's both in those situations, but I have a feeling that there's one mentality over another in most situations. And it leads to another question of like, how people who are able to build with relative ease, like people who know Bubble, people who are comfortable with the no-code platforms. There's a lot of jumping from project to project. People will, they'll go ham on an idea for 6 months, marketing it. This is my passion project. This is my, this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. I'm going to build this thing, and they're super excited about it. And then in 6 months or less, they're on to the next project, right? Now, the question is, did they realize that they weren't solving a problem that people cared about? Certainly a possibility. Or is it that they like the new shiny project idea was too alluring, and it completely distracted them from what they were working on, so they jumped ship? I don't know. I'm definitely feeling this now, as I haven't really got as much traction or interest around the features that I built for freelancers, where it's kind of like, is there really anything even here? But my thought for now, at least as I'm feeling this, is to say, like, stay with it. Like, just dribble the ball, stay in this space, continue to have these conversations, and if there is a feature that comes out of it, fine. But I'm almost not looking for it at this point. It's almost just like, I'm going to just be in the space, talk to these people, listen to the things that they're interested in talking about, and see if there is anything there. Now, I could easily say, you know what, I gave it a go. I put 6 months of this in. I did kind of start at the beginning of the year, so I'm about 6 months into this problem now, and I could have very easily said, I don't think there is anything here. So when do you pivot? When do you say that point where it's like, all right, I'm this isn't really what I thought it was going to be. I'm going to move on to the next thing, right? I don't know where that line is, and I think it's different for everybody. Someone said something interesting the other day in the freelancer channel where it's like they've never been happy with a job for more than 18 months, right? They start hard on the job, they learn it, and after 18 months, they're kind of like ready to move on to the next thing. So every job that that person had is kind of like its own 18-month project where it's like after that they're kind of ready to move on to the next thing. They've learned what they needed to learn from that job or that position, that project, and they're moving on. So why am I saying all this? What am I babbling about? um the I think it's the point at which we as builders and people who can build things call it quits and say, I'm going to move on to the next thing, the next idea, or I'm going to stick with this and continue to see if there is anything here. I don't know where that point is for me. I suppose I'm learning that myself. But that is a big question that I have for a lot of people who I see starting a new project every 6 months. Where does that mentality come from? All right, so that's it for me this week. It's really more of a question than anything else. I will catch you next week. If you are watching this on YouTube, try to jump on the Twitch stream, twitch.tv/bubblehack, and let's get a conversation going around how you're finding your first 1,000 users.